January 1943, central Tunisia. Just before dawn, cold air hangs low over scrubland and shallow ridges. The ground is hard, scarred by tracks and shell craters. German forward positions sit quiet, dug in behind wire and earthworks. These are experienced troops, veterans of France, veterans of Russia, men who trust their guns and their armor. Across the line, unfamiliar engine sounds carry through the dark, louder than expected, steadier, not the sharp clatter of British tanks they know. Something heavier, something different. German observers watch silhouettes move through the half-light, tall hulls, flat sides, a high profile that looks clumsy by European standards. Reports have already named them. American tanks, the M4 Sherman. Too high, too thin, easy targets. At least that is the assumption. Inside the advancing machines, young American crews sit tense and silent. Many have never fired a shot in combat. Their training was rushed, their confidence uncertain. Yet the engines keep moving, orders stand. As the first rounds crack across the valley, mockery fades into calculation, then into urgency, because the line is about to be tested and belief is about to meet reality. By early 1943, the war had already taught hard lessons about armor. Germany entered the conflict with doctrine refined through violence. Poland in 1939, France in 1940, the opening phases of Operation Barbarossa in 1941. Speed, coordination, and decisive armored thrusts defined German success. Tanks were not isolated weapons. They were instruments of combined arms warfare tied tightly to infantry, artillery, and air support. German Panzer units learned to fight aggressively and to exploit weakness quickly. Their officers trusted experience more than theory. By contrast, the United States entered the war late and cautiously. American armored doctrine was still forming. Its tank crews were green. Its officers studied reports instead of battlefields. The M4 Sherman emerged from that environment. It was not designed to duel enemy tanks head-on. American planners did not expect tanks to fight tanks as their primary role. That task belonged to tank destroyers. The Sherman was built to support infantry, exploit breakthroughs, and move fast once lines collapsed. Reliability mattered more than armor thickness. Ease of production mattered more than elegance. Standardization mattered more than prestige. Factories in Detroit, Ohio, and Pennsylvania began producing Shermans at a pace no European power could match. By mid-1942, American industry had turned tank production into an assembly line process. Components were interchangeable. Repairs could be done quickly in the field. Engines started in dust, heat, and cold. German intelligence noticed these numbers but discounted their meaning. A tank built fast, they believed, must be built cheaply. Reports described the Sherman as tall and conspicuous. Its armor appeared thin compared to newer German models. Its main gun, the 75mm, seemed adequate against infantry but unimpressive against Panzer IVs, let alone heavier designs under development. Confidence grew from comparison. German crews trusted their optics, their gunnery, and their experience. They believed American soldiers lacked combat discipline. That belief settled into doctrine. Underestimate the enemy. They can quickly move on, but war does not reward assumptions. It tests systems under pressure. And by the time American armored units crossed into North Africa in strength, the Sherman was no longer a concept. It was real steel, rolling toward first contact. North Africa stripped theory down to reality. Tunisia in late 1942 and early 1943 was not Europe. It was wide open and unforgiving, long sight lines, sparse cover, hard ground that punished engines and suspensions, dust that clogged filters and coated optics, heat by day, cold by night. It was a testing ground where experience mattered and mistakes carried no cover. German forces understood this terrain well. The Afrika Korps had fought across it for years. They had learned how to use ridge lines, wadis, and reverse slopes. They placed anti-tank guns carefully. They concealed armor until the last moment. They expected British-style attacks, slow advances, Predictable routes, limited coordination. American units arrived without that history. Many officers had never seen combat. Crews trained in stateside fields and deserts that could not replicate enemy fire. Radios worked, logistics flowed, but experience was missing. The Sherman entered this environment quietly. Its arrival did not alarm German commanders. Intelligence summaries noted American participation, but framed it as secondary. The main threat was still believed to be British armor. American tanks were expected to perform poorly. Their height made them easy to spot. Their armor was assumed vulnerable to standard German guns. Early encounters seemed to confirm these beliefs. At places like Kasserine Pass, American forces suffered badly. Units broke under pressure. Shermans burned when hit. German reports described American armor as mechanically sound but tactically clumsy. Confidence hardened into certainty. But beneath the surface, something different was happening. Sherman crews adapted quickly. Losses forced learning. Radios allowed coordination that many German tanks still lacked. Engines kept running where others failed. Damaged vehicles returned to the line after rapid repair. Replacement tanks arrived faster than German intelligence predicted. American commanders began adjusting tactics. Shermans were no longer sent forward alone. Infantry support improved. Artillery coordination tightened. Air power entered the equation. The tank was no longer treated as a single weapon. It became part of a system. German assumptions began to strain. The Sherman did not behave like earlier Allied tanks. It appeared again after being knocked out. It attacked from unexpected directions. It moved at night. It advanced behind rolling barrages. It did not seek honorable duels. It sought ground. Reports from the field grew more cautious. Some German officers noted the Sherman's reliability. Others noted the speed at which American units absorbed losses in return. The tall silhouette that invited mockery also allowed better crew visibility. The armor that seemed thin was often sloped and better than it appeared. Most importantly, the Sherman was never alone. Each engagement revealed more coordination, more pressure, more weight behind the advance. The battlefield was changing, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. And as both sides maneuvered for advantage across the Tunisian hills, it became clear that the next confrontation would not be a learning exercise. It would be a test, one that would challenge beliefs formed too early. The first angle is human. Inside a Sherman, space is tight and loud. Engines roar inches from crewmen's backs. The smell of fuel and oil never fades. Heat builds fast, even in cold weather. For many American crews in Tunisia, this was their first real battlefield. They learned under fire. Mistakes were immediate and unforgiving. A missed signal, a delayed order, a moment of hesitation. Each could end in flame. Yet these crews adapted with speed that surprised even their own officers. Radios connected tanks to one another and to infantry. Orders changed quickly. Crews trusted procedures drilled into them during training, not because those procedures were perfect, but because they existed. Men learned to move, fire, and reposition without waiting for direct visual contact. Fear remained, but it became managed. The second angle is German. Panzer crews facing the Sherman were not inexperienced soldiers. Many had survived years of combat. They trusted their gunnery. Their optics were excellent. Their anti-tank doctrine emphasized precision and patience. When they first engaged American tanks, they expected the familiar rhythm of destruction followed by withdrawal. What unsettled them was repetition. Shermans kept coming. Losses did not slow the advance in the way German crews expected. Units disengaged, regrouped, and returned. Reports began noting American persistence, not reckless, methodical, supported by artillery and airstrikes that arrived on schedule. The third angle is technological. The Sherman was not the most heavily armed or armored tank on the battlefield, but it was balanced. Its suspension handled rough ground reliably. Its engine started when others stalled. Its turret traverse was smooth and powered. Its gun, while modest on paper, was effective against infantry positions, anti-tank guns, and fortifications. This mattered more often than tank duels. German crews mocked its height and shape, but they could not mock its presence, because it was always there. In numbers, repaired, replaced, reinforced, these three angles began to intersect on the battlefield. Human adaptation, enemy miscalculation. Technology used as part of a system. Together, they pushed both sides toward a moment where theory would no longer hold. The fourth angle is tactical. Early Sherman losses came from poor employment, not from inherent weakness. When used piecemeal, they failed. When pushed forward without infantry or artillery, they burned. That lesson was learned fast. American units began grouping Shermans into coordinated formations. Tanks advanced behind artillery fire. Infantry cleared anti-tank positions. Engineers marked safe routes. Air support loitered overhead. German defenses relied on killing the lead elements and stopping momentum. That worked against earlier Allied attacks. Against Shermans used in depth, it worked less often. Even when the first wave was hit, the second continued. Momentum did not collapse. The objective shifted from survival to ground gained. The fifth angle is leadership. American commanders were flexible in a way German doctrine discouraged. Junior officers adjusted plans without waiting for approval. Radio networks allowed rapid correction. When attacks failed, new ones formed quickly. This adaptability reduced hesitation. It allowed mistakes without paralysis. German leadership remained confident but rigid. Assumptions about American weakness slowed adaptation. Orders emphasized holding ground rather than adjusting posture. That confidence had served them well earlier in the war. In Tunisia, it began to cost time. The sixth angle is moral. Mockery changes behavior. When an enemy is dismissed, caution fades. German crews exposed themselves longer. They waited to fire for better shots. They assumed the first hit would be enough. Against Sherman supported by infantry and artillery, that delay mattered. American crews fought with urgency. They knew they were underestimated. Losses reinforced focus rather than panic. Each engagement became proof that they belonged on the battlefield. By early 1943, these angles converged. Tactical adaptation, leadership flexibility, moral pressure. The Sherman was no longer evaluated as a machine. It was evaluated as part of an advancing force. The stage was set for a decisive encounter, one that would force German commanders to revise their assumptions under fire. February 1943. The Tunisian front tightens. German positions anchor themselves along ridges and narrow passes that funnel movement. These are strong lines, chosen deliberately, covered by anti-tank guns, overwatched by armor in hull-down positions. The terrain favors the defender. It always has. American units move forward anyway. Sherman battalions advance in coordination with infantry and artillery. Fire plans are brief and direct. Smoke screens cut visibility. Forward observers adjust barrages in real time. The attack does not rush. It presses. German guns open fire at long range. The first Shermans are hit. Some burn. Crews bail out under machine gun fire. This is expected. Losses are part of the plan. What matters is what follows. More Shermans crest the ridge, not in a single line, in staggered movement. One fires while another moves. Infantry stays close, flushing anti-tank teams from concealed positions. German gunners shift targets, then shift again. Ammunition runs low faster than planned. Radio traffic on the German side grows tense. Targets do not disappear after being hit. New ones appear. Artillery lands behind defensive positions, cutting off movement. Air attacks follow. Short, violent, accurate. At several strong points, German units report being engaged from multiple directions at once. This is new. American coordination is improving faster than German estimates predicted. Panzer counterattacks meet prepared fire. Shermans do not chase. They hold ground and wait. By midday, the pressure becomes continuous. Defensive fire slows. Communication between German units falters. The line does not collapse yet. But it bends, and bending consumes energy. Reports reach command posts describing American armor as persistent and well supported, not elegant, not superior in single combat, but effective, relentless. As the sun lowers, German commanders face an unfamiliar problem. The position is still held, but the cost is rising, and the enemy shows no sign of stopping. The moment approaches where holding ground will demand more than confidence. By late afternoon, the German line reaches its limit. Ammunition stocks thin, gun barrels overheat, crews grow exhausted. The terrain that once protected now traps movement. Every attempt to reposition draws fire. Every exposed silhouette invites artillery. American pressure does not peak, it stays constant. Shermans push forward in measured bounds. When one halts, another moves. Infantry follows close, using the tanks as moving cover. Engineers clear obstacles under fire. Radios keep the formation intact even when visibility collapses. German counterattacks form and fail. Panzer units emerge to strike the advancing armor, expecting shock to break momentum. Instead, they meet prepared fire and airstrikes already inbound. American commanders anticipated the response. The battlefield has become layered. At several points along the line, German units begin falling back without orders, not in panic, in calculation. Positions that were meant to hold all day are abandoned by evening. Reports describe American tanks overrunning gun pits and rolling directly through defensive belts thought secure. The Sherman does not win by duel, it wins by presence. German officers note the shift in tone among their troops. The enemy is no longer dismissed. The word toy disappears from reports. It is replaced with terms like numerous, reliable, coordinated. The realization settles quietly and without ceremony. By nightfall, sections of the line are broken, not shattered, broken enough. American units hold ground gained. Repairs begin immediately. Disabled Shermans are recovered. Replacement vehicles arrive. The advance pauses not because it must, but because it chooses to consolidate. German command now faces a different war, one where industrial weight and coordination matter as much as armor thickness, one where underestimation has narrowed options. The turning point has passed. What follows will be measured in consequences rather than assumptions. The immediate aftermath is not dramatic, it is administrative. That is how wars reveal truth. German after-action reports revise language first. Where earlier summaries spoke of inexperienced Americans and inferior machines, new documents emphasize coordination and persistence. Losses are recalculated. Ammunition expenditure is higher than expected. Defensive positions are reassessed. The Sherman is no longer categorized as a novelty. Casualty figures tell the story more clearly. American units take losses. They always do, but they replace them quickly. Disabled tanks return to service within days. Crews rotate. Supply lines function. German losses are harder to replace. Experienced gunners are gone. Vehicles abandoned for lack of fuel or repair capacity remain where they fell. Territory gained is modest on the map, but psychologically it matters. American commanders report increased confidence. Units that once hesitated now press attacks with discipline. Lessons learned at Kasserine are applied, not perfectly, but effectively. German commanders begin adjusting tactics. Anti-tank defenses deepen. Heavier guns are prioritized. Engagement distances change. There is less waiting, less mockery, more urgency. The Sherman's reputation shifts quietly among both sides. American crews still know its limits. They know it can burn. They know German guns can kill it. But they also know it will start, it will move. It will be there tomorrow. For German forces, the realization is uncomfortable. The enemy is not brittle. He is adaptable, and his machines reflect that adaptability. These immediate changes ripple outward. They affect planning, deployment, and expectation. The battle does not end the war, but it ends an illusion. And as the front stabilizes and both sides prepare for the next phase, the consequences begin to extend far beyond Tunisia. Beyond Tunisia, the lesson spreads. German planners now treat American armor as a permanent factor. The Sherman becomes a baseline threat rather than a curiosity. Countermeasures accelerate. The long-barreled 75 mm guns appear in greater numbers. Heavier tanks move from concept to priority. Defensive doctrine shifts toward depth and layered fire. At the same time, American production expands without pause. Shermans roll off assembly lines in numbers that reshape strategy. Units train with standardized equipment. Crews rotate through replacements that feel familiar no matter where they arrive. Logistics become a weapon in themselves. In Italy and later in Western Europe, the Sherman carries the weight of that system. It is not always superior on paper. It is often outgunned, but it arrives on time. It operates in coordination with infantry, artillery, and aircraft. It accepts losses and continues forward. German forces feel the pressure of scale. Each destroyed Sherman is replaced. Each lost German tank is a growing absence. Reports reflect a change in tone. The enemy is no longer inexperienced. He is industrial, organized, patient. The Sherman becomes a symbol of that reality, not invincible, but unavoidable. By 1944, German crews no longer mock its appearance. They recognize it instantly. They plan for it. They respect it. That shift does not come from propaganda. It comes from contact. The consequences are not confined to tank design. They influence morale, strategy, the understanding of modern warfare, where reliability and coordination can outweigh individual superiority. As the war progresses, the Sherman's role expands from battlefield tool to historical marker. A reminder that war is not won by brilliance alone. It is won by systems that endure. The M4 Sherman was never meant to be admired. It was built to move, to start every morning, to be repaired at night, to carry ordinary men into extraordinary danger and bring as many of them back as possible. Its value was not found in single moments of dominance, but in repetition. German commanders learned this too late. They judged the Sherman by silhouette and armor thickness. They measured it against ideals formed in earlier victories. What they faced instead was a machine shaped by a different understanding of war. The Sherman represented a shift from craftsmanship to production, from individual superiority to collective strength, from perfection to reliability. It did not promise survival. It promised presence. In Tunisia, that presence broke assumptions. In Italy and France, it broke lines. Not by brilliance, by endurance. History remembers tanks for their power, but wars are often decided by what keeps coming when confidence fades. The Sherman kept coming. That is why it mattered.